Okay. This talk by Nadim Karam is about his public art interventions around the world related to his traveling and stories. Nadim creates narratives engaging with cities and landscapes through large-scale sculptures. He's an architect and artist known internationally for his public space installations in Tokyo, Shanghai, London, Brussels, Venice, Dubai, Kuwait, to mention a few, and of course, Beirut. Based on his convictions that cities should dream, Karam's art practice in the public sphere responds to contemporary challenges, social realities, and eternal quests for identity. Four monographs on his work have been published by Booth Cliburn Editions in London. In 2002, Nadim Karam co-chaired the UN New York University Conference in London for the reconstruction of Kabul and was selected as a curator for Lebanon by the first Rotterdam Biennale. He lives and works in Beirut and Rotterdam. So welcome, Nadim, and please, you can start. We are all ears. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
okay, go ahead, please.
Can you hear me, everybody? I think so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Robert, for inviting me to this exciting meeting of several universities.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I'm looking forward to what I'll be saying now, and I hope you follow up with me. The thing is that when Robert, I was just chatting with him by chance, and I told him about my project, The Gesture. He said, "But that's very interesting for us. We're working on the same area in Beirut, in the port area." So, and he said, "We're working about trauma and public art." I said, "Wow, trauma. I haven't thought of my work as being part of trauma, but now that you said it, let me look into that." And that was very interesting for me because, in fact, it's not far from that, when I started digging in my mind and trying to find out what's happening. So, the project, The Gesture, I'll be presenting this project as well as a little bit taking you through what I have been doing recently and the way my thinking process goes. So, uh, wait, okay. So, of course, now we're all confined to where we are, and traveling has been much less. Although it's very important to get the five senses moving. So we're in a state of mind that has shifted completely these days. And wherever we go in the world and wherever we look at the world, there is always those both extremities of joyfulness, sadness, war, happiness. All of these things are mixed together, and we are to extract the things that are important for us from those. And here you have kind of black rain, which happened, in fact, in Hiroshima after the bomb, but at the same time, it's now a beautiful city. So the joyfulness of things should always build up and get over things, which means basically creativity. Now, I would like to introduce a work that I've done recently at the Venice Art Biennale, which is called Politics of Dialogues, the Merry-Go-Round. And basically, in our region of the world, there's too much shouting, but not much to listen to. So the shouting overtake it, and we're all in a kind of weird world of shouting and just getting our voice higher without having to say much about it. So in that sense, I've created a few works, like in this here, it's called Le Dialogue des Sourds, the dialogue of the deaf. And if a nation could be trapped, in fact, between those two huge shouts facing each other. So people getting inside this could be trapped by the power of what could come to them. But still, shouting doesn't mean that we've reached somewhere. And behind, you have the silence. So shout and silence are things very important in my work, and recently has been the silence being the refugees that had to leave without knowing and without having a voice to express themselves, although they are the majority somewhere. So here is a series of shouts going on, and this shows politics of dialogue, where you have different kinds of people shouting on a merry-go-round. In fact, I created a whole mechanism for this so that the platform turns, rotates, and then the sculptures go up and down like a merry-go-round with the music of merry-go-round, just to say about the funny situation in which we are, where you just move around, you're shouting, politicians goes up and down, everything happens, but the dialogue reaches nowhere. And this situation applies a lot to Lebanon as much as to other places in the world. At the time of Brexit, it was also there too. And here you have the platform. I wanted to show video, but I don't know how to put it in context, but it's fine. It gives you an idea of how they rotate. You can see some of them already up on the platform, other down. It gives the spirit of the work. And here is the big shout, I mean, that comes from inside them. But it reminded me of a work that I did in Japan early days, which was called Family Crisis. So it's about the people who were dead, wrapped, and the others that are living, etc. And my family, how it was growing. And I've lived 10 years in Japan, where I spent my master's and my PhD degree. I did not introduce myself at the beginning. Robert did it for me, but I have spent quite a long time in Japan, and have been taken by their culture, by their way of thinking, and I appreciated the whole thing when I was there. Now comes trauma. So when Robert said trauma, of course, I know what is trauma, but I thought I should define it. I should see what is really trauma, which is the response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event. Uh, Let me take this. That overwhelms an individual ability to cope, causes feelings of helplessness, diminishes their sense of self and their ability to feel a full range of emotions and experiences. It does not discriminate, and it is pervasive throughout the world. Now, it does not discriminate. It does not discriminate in areas where it cannot discriminate. But for us in Lebanon, I think when you say that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope, it's in our case, that overwhelms a nation's ability to cope. You know, the suppressors, as much as the suppressed, have been into a trauma in Lebanon. So, and the trauma of the explosion has overwhelmed us. I mean, you even don't know that you are in a trauma. But the notion is very true to all of us. And through what I will be showing you, you will know more about that. So,
Ja, we hadden al gedacht, we dachten al, ik ga zo maar.
sorry? Somebody's talking to me, or okay. So here is one of
could you mute all your mics, please? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, here is a painting that I have done recently, which is 10 meters long. So I thought I stopped painting after the explosion, but then I had a roll of 10 meters by 2 meters, and I said, okay, I'm going to open this roll in my atelier. I'll show you the atelier later. And I started just throwing paint on it on a daily basis. After a month, I started seeing the shape of this person that you see here. I don't know if you can notice it. On the right side, there is a kind of head, and then you have a whole body that continues on the right side with the legs on the right side. Anyway, this was kind of a healing process, if you want. It means paint was just accumulating layers, and then I could see like the agape of this person that's lost in his own atmosphere, if you want, and I called it nowhere, somewhere, everywhere. Which is how I think I feel and many of us feel in those days. Even the confinement people could join this feeling. And after that, what happened, I thought everything has to change. And that's how I have decided to start looking for a possibility to have an office outside Lebanon, which is Rotterdam, in fact. So, and the name of my office, which was Atelier Hapsitus, is shifting to Nadim Karam Studio. We're doing an identity for this. And here is my office in Beirut that has been transformed completely, where we used to do all these work and projects that public art projects that we do internationally. But there's always a beginning, and the beginning is triggered by so many things. In fact, it's interesting after Robert spoke about the trauma to say that I have been kidnapped, and due to that, not only due to that, but one of the reasons for which I left Lebanon at the time, we're talking 1980s, I left to Tokyo, where I did my master's and PhD in architecture. Tokyo was a city in bubble, always bubbling with ideas, freshness, everything new there. And in comparison, Beirut was really street fighting, civil war. These boundaries are shifting slightly to be taken back to the other section. Streets are shifting. Even streets were vanishing, other streets were appearing. So Beirut was a city that was just the opposite of what Tokyo was. And I had left Lebanon and was thrown in this super contemporary city, which is Tokyo. And this took me when I came back to start moving in those streets and creating projects based on that. And this is how I created my first project, which is the Musée Cirso, where I put the sculptures, which I called the archaic procession, and I recalled later urban toys, climbing on buildings, moving into other contexts, trying to discover Beirut, if something. And this has also continued to the carrier that carried the National Museum of Beirut after its renovation and took it to different cities. So it was kind of a story that I created. And this continued. It's a huge structure which reminds of the project I will show you later, which is now. And then I created a project that was moving in Beirut city, moving in areas that have been completely destroyed, moving in areas that were under renovation, and moving in areas just trying to rediscover Beirut the way it became, to the different points that you see there. So here you can see that they just invaded the city center of Beirut that's now completely constructed. So this is another of those nostalgic photos, if you want, because before that it was filled. After that, so there is lots of changes to Beirut, to its roots, to its history. And here, this building doesn't exist, of course. So the archaic procession, the music boy and music girl were passing by there, trying to join East and West Beirut into one. And then I started introducing the fetishes, the colors, into the procession. And here I will show you kind of a series of small projects, not small, in fact, major projects that happened in different cities due to, I wouldn't like to call it an escape from what's happening here, but more of a diversity and the belief in the diversity of the Lebanese first, and the human beings. I mean, we're all diverse, and it's in this diversity that we need to find richness rather than seek conflict. So in that sense, I started diversifying myself through the people I work with. So here is in Japan, in Nara city, where I have planted in the water here. I won't go into the detail of each project. So this is more a general thing. I planted 1,000 sculptures in the water. You can see the volunteers from different universities also that came to help in this project. And we were just putting sculptures all the time. And then I put what I call the 3 magic flowers of Jichu, which are 6-7 meter height, each in front of the biggest Buddhist structure in the world, the Daibutsu-den, with the biggest Buddha. But that was a kind of an interesting way to create a new dream, a dream that is based on a story of the monk Jichu that used to come from an area which is ours, somewhere here, and who lived in the 7th century, and in fact 754 in fact, and who has built all of that. I mean, many of those things. Here you can see the sculptures in the water and the reflection of those sculptures in front of the big Buddha there. Now we move to Melbourne, where also on the Sandwich Bridge, which you see here, I have created a project called the Travelers, that the travelers that are moving to the Flinders station just before the Commonwealth Games. So the Queen had to come and inaugurate the whole thing. So they've asked me, or it was a whole story to reach that we're going to create the different phases of migration into the city of Melbourne. And here you can see we're already installing some of the sculpture. They were huge sculpture of 3 floors height each that were moving on the bridge on a daily basis and are still moving. It's a permanent work for the city of Melbourne.
Yeah, lekker.
And here you have an overlap of those sculptures that are on the bridge. You can see already 2 of them are in movement. So on a daily basis, morning, noon, and night, these sculptures move on the bridge. I call them the urban clock for the city, and defines breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the time for those, if something. And each one of them represent a phase of migration into the city of Melbourne. They have all different names, they represent different stages. But for the Aboriginal work, which is called Gaib, which you see here, that's fixed on a rock and does not move like the rest because it represents the Aboriginals, which was very interesting because the Aboriginal people inaugurated the whole ceremony of the opening of the project with the presence of the Prime Minister. So there was this interest of the different sculpture representing different ethnic backgrounds and different people. So here you have the sculptures on the bridge. People are trying to see them. You have the butterfly girl representing the Asian migration. Then you have the multicultural sun representing the multicultural aspect of Melbourne. And here you have them all one after the other directing or going in the same line that the train used to bring the migrants to the city through the Flinders station. That's just in front, the yellow part. If we continue here, I'm shifting quite quickly, but this is a project in Kuwait. So it is for the cultural museums of Kuwait, where they wanted to create a certain identity of sculpture that will define what is inside each one of the museum. So in this case, this is Arfaj with a yellow color, about 12-meter height, and that would represent the biodiversity inside because of a flower called Arfaj in Kuwait that brings the desert sand together. And for each of the works we will represent, this is Dilmun. Dilmun is a kind of 3,000 years old town and thinking process, if you want, in Kuwait. So it's a civilization, if you want, and that would represent the prehistoric sculptures or the prehistoric museum, and at the same time is kind of deep in the history of Kuwait. So you can see the scale of the work were very big, like you have here about 15-meter high sculptures. This is called also each one, this is called Sila, which comes from Salah, which means the prayer, and Sila is to put things together, and it's about it's in front of the Museum of Islamic Art. And each one, etc. Like here you have also Kadima, which is a port, old port in Kuwait, and inside is transportation. So this dealt with the transportation, the bridging between 2 areas, and it just went like that, you know. But then I just moved back to the blast and what happened to Beirut recently, which is, I think, 7 months ago. It's on the 4th of August. And this was something that blew our mind. It did not only blow the port area, it just took us all by surprise. But the non-surprise thing was the corruption of our government and the way something could reach what we see in front of us. So Beirut was destroyed in its heart, in its harbor, and each one of us who survived that has their own story. So there are victims who died because of that, and each one of us know very much that we could have been the victims because they got us in our homes. We were in our homes, and that's the most secure place for us. And this is where most of the people died, in their own houses. I could have been in my house. In fact, I was 1 hour before there. Robert could have been. There are many Lebanese probably in this meeting who could have been there, passing by, etc. So it all took us completely by surprise. My daughter was somewhere near, everything broke in front of her. So we were all concerned. And here I would think when Robert said trauma and public art, I usually don't like to use this connect trauma to public art, but I could not. I mean, it is very much connected to what I will be showing you, which is the gesture. You know, in fact, this is in the Kralingen Lake in Rotterdam, where I went. I spent 1 month there after the explosion. I went with my family because I'm thinking of moving there while having my office still here. So moving between both cities. I was while walking around this lake, which is a beautiful small lake, not big in fact, but I was always thinking of what happened in Beirut. I could not really understand what happened, and I was in a zone where I couldn't really distinguish things. So I thought, if I want to start again functioning, I need to resolve the issue of the victims that died during this blast, you know, the explosion of the 4th of August. And I set a correspondence with my own office to start looking into that, you know, to see how can we do something. And that's where the idea of the gesture came about. So I called, first of all, you know, the hangars in Beirut have been destroyed completely. In the free zone, everything. So I know people who have hangars. I said, look, could you give us the steel that you would recollect so that we can use it again, the scrap steel, transforming it into a creative process. The damage has been enormous to the city, but even the hole that's there testifies for what really happened. A place that was really, that we used to pass by, see a huge building over there in the port, suddenly became ruins that we all now see, understand, look at as a symbol of corruption, of a presence that is haunting us, if you want. In fact, when I worked on this project, more than one person in the office requested, if possible, not to work on this. They avoided passing on the streets that will lead to looking at the silos of Beirut. Imagine, I was not aware of this, but when they came and said this, but when I started the project, they came back to me and said, now that you have done that, probably we can join you on the effort you're doing just to bring this project together. So these are photos every time I go to the port. Now I have a permit, you know, for doing this. I had to meet a general in the army with the president and director of the port. And of course, meeting so many from the Mukhabarat, the Secret Service, the security people. It's a whole process to get those necessary permits to do a project of this sort. But, and for me, it's a gesture which is offered as a memory for the victims of the blast, because the government is almost somewhere else in their thoughts. They have no idea of what's happening. So it's for us to make this effort and do this project. So these are the hangars destroyed of Net Logistics, the people that I met. So you can see the hangar in which stage and in which stage it became and what I would like to transform it into. So in fact, you know, everybody has been collaborative on this project, have been, the understanding is beyond imagination, and everybody has been voluntarily helping on it. You know, it did not until now cost us anything, because whoever I speak with, they say, of course we want to help you. I was stuck in the elevator for 3 hours. The other one would say, wow, I was there and the whole glass fell on me. The third one would say, so the survivors, even if they're not damaged via injuries on their faces or physical injury, of which I know many that have been like this, like our neighbor just lost one eye and the other eye, she sees 20% with it. I mean, lots of stories. But for the surviving people who are definitely under a trauma, they will definitely help on this project. So these are the names of the victims that have died. There were 210, 211 of them, and the list is still shifting slightly. And these are the names of the people who are supporting the initiative. Of course, the Port of Beirut is offering us, has given us the approval plus, is offering us the logistics behind what they still have, which is not much. Like, for example, the issue that I have today, I was a whole time in discussion to see how they will put a disjoncteur for electricity for me. And they said, look, we have to find if we have still in the storage space from where everything has exploded to put for you one disjoncteur in the free zone area. And we don't know how to do that. We don't have people working. So every day is a challenge in order to move one step further in this project. So you have Net Logistics, which has lended us the steel because they usually sell it. The destroyed steel is scrap steel is much cheaper than the original one, but still it's something to sell. Abnia, which is a contractor, is offering us to create the foundation. Watermaster, we would like to put a feature of water there, so to say a source of life is happening, is offering us the process of the whole water system. Maurice Saloum is a private person who's offering us the lighting. Shekerjian states if in case there are things that still need to have money for them or something, they're offering to support this initiative. Par Consultants will offer the structural studies. Jebco Steel Industry will offer the fabrication. Joseph Chartouni will offer the documentation. The Lebanese army are ready to offering us the cement to do this. The Sûreté Générale is offering the permits for which they usually charge money. XYZ has offered the laser scanning of the project, and Bitar and Raya is offering the crane shifting of all the steel and things. And the list is growing. So we have, like, Aramex has just offered us the site because their hangars has blown off. There's nothing remaining of the site, but the platform, and they offered us this platform on which we will start building and fabricating the sculpture this week, hopefully. So it's a whole thing. And we would like to place it, if possible, near the silos. And near the silos, we have lots of cracks, lots of issues. We got a ZIP to tell us about the cracks, and they kind of advise us not to put anything there. So we're working on these. This shows also the hangars and their state. And this is the beam scanning of what is remaining from the hangar. So we have all these beams scanned by a professional company so that we know how to do the whole work. So we know what are the beams that we have, the number of beams, the length of those beams. And based on that, we're using the beams that have been completely, there are no more straight, they have been bended and everything, and using them as they are to create the sculpture. So of course, when we do the work, it's going also to transform, but at least it gives us a guidance of how to go about it. Recently, the structural studies have been done. In red, the structural engineers have added a few things, like in the head to link things, etc., and we're moving ahead with the scheme. Recently, they said that instead of making a concrete footing, what you can do is to get 4 containers. So I'm working with the port authorities now to give us 4 of their hundreds of destroyed containers, but at least the best ones, so that structurally they're fit, and we will go and select those. So it's a project that is in process and in progress. And I've learned through this project not to get tensed about things not being done, because nothing is being done. It's so difficult to convince anybody in the port where they've lost everything. And even more than that, they've lost almost their salaries, because they were paid in Lebanese, and they're disgusted. Some of them are in their 60s. They're everything has gone. They're it's a pity. Their retirement fee, everything has gone. So they are in disarray. So when you ask them to do something, first, they've lost all people working for them. Second, they've lost their money. Third, they've been totally affected. There's nothing functioning. So a small disjuncteur in a place takes a whole discussion. But I'm really I can only say that I'm proud of all of them because this project is still moving and all are really enthusiastic to make this happen. And just lately, the director of maintenance there said, you know, Nadim, nothing is happening at the port. Nothing will happen at the port. If you continue, at least you give us hope that something could happen at this port. I don't know. So it was something. It was an encouragement to see that we're still on. We're still on. Like I need since Friday, I need the permit to start fabrication, but the issue is that there is a welding process, and all what initiated this explosion is the welding. So the Secret Service are so worried about hearing only the word weld that they stop everything. So now we're trying with APAV. I've got the permits from APAV to start work. Still waiting for the colonel to give us his approval to start, but he had to take it to a higher stage in the army so that they accept to give us this approval. So I'm still waiting, but I'm not rushing because it just doesn't work. It's not like you're working in a normal condition area. You just have to take it. It could take 2 weeks to do one thing that normally would be one day, but we're moving. I can say that I cannot complain about that. I've been recently to the port area where I took these couple of photos. You can see this boat, due to the explosion, just went completely up on the deck. It was in the water, it just jumped to the deck. And here is the relationship. In fact, my site is the intersection between the boat and the silos. It's somewhere there. The thing is that to do that, if it's container or foundation, the structural engineers has requested that we dig 1 meter down for the flexibility. It's a 25-meter high sculpture. So it's 8 floors height. So they are worried about structural stability, especially that the steel that has been affected by the explosion. And sometimes after the explosion, by 10 days, another fire happened in the port, which also affected the steel. So they cannot give to the steel the density that it really has. They have to go with lower grades just in case, you know. So, but digging is yet not accepted by the port authorities because if you dig there, you are at the level of the water. So it's something else we're solving. Like every step, we need to solve 100 issues, and we take them step by step. So at least this gives you a general idea of where I've reached with gesture, and I hope this gesture happened because everybody has been a victim, everybody has been traumatized, and this hopefully will come as the process of taking whatever has destroyed us, the destruction, and transforming it with the community around us, all these professional people that are offering their time, their energy, their money into creating a creative sculpture that would be offered as a gesture to the victims of Beirut. So I won't be long anymore, but I'll tell you that I live in the Muse, which is this structure where I have my house, which is up, and my atelier, which is down. So down there is my atelier. I am sitting now in the house on the second window from the left. That's where I am now, overlooking everything. This is the Muse, my atelier, in fact. And in this atelier, I've been during confinement for the first time. I really use it, and I've created a few works related to the confinement. So here is the flowers, confinement flowers, which is a reaction to the coronavirus thing that we have. And I've taken the wooden crates that were wrapping my sculptures, the size of the wooden crate, and created with them this work. I've created a series called Larger Than Life Itself, which is a huge canvases because my atelier is big enough to accept this. And I think we are in situations since 1 year, all of us, not only Lebanese, situations that are larger than our life itself. It takes us time to understand it, to accept it, to run with it. And this is called The Blast, which is about what happened. I started it before the blast and continued it after the blast. There are huge canvases of 5 meter by 8 meters. And I think it represents the ejaculation, the kind of explosion, followed by death, but the feeling of love still being there, and the flower that's just blossoming fully in it. So all of this comes from this feeling of what could be done. I've started a new series now, which is on this flat thing, which I call absence. And here in the middle of that, you have the silence, and then the smoke that suddenly became all an absent thing. It's still in the beginning where I want to use bitumen, the zifit, the kind of asphalt, with broken mirrors to create new works from now on, based on the idea of absence and based on the idea of the blast that happened to Beirut. Now I take you back a little bit to the latest project I did in public art, which is in the desert of Al-Ula, and which has lots of dreams in it and is influenced by the flora and the fauna of the area. And they created a series of sculptures just trying to say that we should preserve our fauna and flora, and there is lots of it that's disappearing in the world. So it was a kind of message, and they go on a parade, that's called On Parade, on a parade of celebration of the keeping of trying to keep as much as possible the fauna and the flora of the area. So this is the latest project I could do. It was last March, just before the confinement. Here you can see the shadows of the work. And of course, I will always finish with the cloud, which is an idea in our minds, and the fishing and the cloud that sometimes transform and become, in this case, the stretching thoughts. So our thoughts just stretch, like the cloud has no boundary. Our thoughts should not have boundary. We should accept all diversity around us. So you have here the stretching thought seated, and just down by the water, you have the standing, the shepherd, while here is the thinker, and they are always in dialogue, in fact. So you can see the standing stretched thought, the shepherd stretching his thoughts. We have, of
Where
course,
is it, Nadim? Where
sorry?
is it? Where is it?
This is in United World College in Wales.
Okay.
Yeah, this is in Wales.
Okay.
So, in fact, yeah. So here you have, of course, the idea of the clouds and the idea of the thoughts that usually are reigning with creativity. Here you have the thoughts, and usually when our thoughts reign that much, they hopefully reign with creativity. I think that's it. Thank you very much, and it gives you an idea of what I'm doing.
Great, Nadim. Thank you so much for this highly inspirational, amazing work. It's actually, I will call it, it's about uncertainty and hope at this time. So really, it's a very inspirational work that's directly tied to the theme of our studio. Especially as urban designers, we always look towards how to appropriate public space through installations, through public arts. And you have showed us so many examples in your work about this intimate relationship between creativity and public space. Also, what I found really amazing is that you gave us an example at this particular time of the private-public partnership in art, which is not happening actually even in architecture, in repairing the different sites that were the blast sites. And here we can see that you succeeded, where, it's the most difficult to succeed creating a public art on the blast site. That's amazing. I think, that this part of how you were able to bring together private and public actors in this project is much more impressive than, sorry to say, than anything else, because putting the public and the private at this very difficult time in Beirut is really a challenge, is a tour de force. So really, many thanks, Nadim, for this highly inspirational presentation. Now, I would like to, is there any questions from,
Yes.
please go ahead.
Nadim, thank you so much for the really wonderful work, and most importantly, your enthusiasm. I think that we need in the current context people like you with your drive. I think it was really wonderful to look at the work, and I've personally had the chance to experience some of your work in person. I visited your atelier. I've immersed myself in a lot of the artwork that you've done over the years. I have a question regarding your intervention in the port, and specifically maybe around the element of water, that you are somehow can you just talk a little bit more about that and its relationship to maybe the context of the port, the proximity to water, to the sea, and then using it maybe as a mean to is there an idea of purification around that? Is there an idea of ablution? Or I was just curious to know more about that.
Thank you anyway for your question. And of course, the port proximity of water is an essential thing of the port. The first image that I showed about the crate that has been created by the explosion shows that it is there that I wanted to put the sculpture, the gesture, if you want. So it should have been in the middle. When I was in Rotterdam, my mind was looking at the middle of the water, and that's where it should have been. When I had my first meeting with the General Hwayek, he said, Nadim, that the explosion is the water in that point, which used to be at the surface, is 35 meters deep. I never imagined that it's going to be that deep at that point. They have done some research and they found out. He said, there is no way. I said, we put some piling and etc. We started talking about the whole process or how we would link it to the water as such. And talking about the water, the cleanness of the water and all of those things, it's disgusting even to get near the water, because the smell of the sewage systems, which I don't know where from or whatever, was kind of crazy. But the second time we went, it was getting clearer, and the third time was even clearer. And even they took some of the cranes, of which you could see only the surface of them by the water. So it's 40-meter crane that you see only the last 2 meters, and you would think, okay, this is something floating. But no, the real thing is down deep there. So the relationship to the water has been, and there's something which I understood at the port. The port authorities have in their hands whatever is no water. So the water is not part of the port authorities system. There is another section which is called Almina, and that are in charge of everything that deals with water. So if you want to put anything that is in the intersection between water and deck, you need to have two authorities involved in the whole process. I think the other one has somewhere more of the army thing, because the military port is just next. And in that military port, you have the military boat and the whole system there. So I kind of, with time, I learned that I have to work on one of both sides, not in both, because then it will be impossible to finish anything. So I've decided to work on firm land within the port zone. Even now, we are discussing if we put it in the port zone or the free zone of the port. So there are lots of, and I would prefer in the port zone, there's still to resolve the issue of digging there, which will be given also. So this issue of water versus port has lots of things to do with the authorities involved in the process. with the structural issues involved in the process, with the cleanness of the thing. Anyway, when the project will be done and finished and assembled and placed there, it cannot be approached by people. I will try to, I have in mind to do a concert there. Anyway, maybe I should not talk about this, but with, to just because it seems if you cross the port zone area, for them, you're already in a custom clearance outside Lebanon. So every time I enter the port, I am in a zone where I could be considered not in Lebanon, you know? So whoever enters that is also another issue for which they have so much concern. Every time we want to enter the port, we have the necessary permits. We have
so you know where to escape now.
Yeah. I mean, this is, yeah. I escape in my mind, but that's another escape if you want me to go there. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, please?
Yes, Robert, may I have a question to
Nadim? Of course.
Hi,
welcome,
Nadim.
Welcome.
Yeah, this is Qian Liu from Tsinghua University, which is based in Beijing, China. So I appreciate very much your presentation on your work, and I feel very exciting to see your very encouraging work in the poor area. So sometimes, it's hard for us to imagine the very, tragic situation in Beirut. But when I work together with my students on the reconstruction of this area, I'm thinking, what will be the role of art in the reconstruction of the city, not only the port area, but also the whole city, because, according to our very limited understanding about the city was, as Robert always highlighted, that it was a traumatic city. So there are also the segregation in terms of housing, income, and also, but there are something rising like the cultural and the creative activities. So my question is, is it possible that we create a kind of your artwork like yours in the desert, in the public space of the city, as a kind of a catalyst to promote the inclusion of the communities? And then the second question, how you judge the influence of let's say the art or cultural activities in the city, like your studio works in the city?
Okay, thank you very much for your questions. First of all, there is a survival process after the blast. Houses have been totally destroyed. There are more than 300,000 people displaced. In a Chinese context, that's not maybe that many, but in the Lebanese context, this is huge. This is huge because I also understood that at a certain time in Tianjin, there was the same sort of explosion that happens in 2015. And I'm sure this has distressed the city as much or less, because for us it's the capital that has been affected. There are so many NGOs that have been helping. The government is totally absent from any support, in the sense they're in a trauma zone. They are completely lost in their own thing.
Except in your case, Nadim.
Sorry?
Except in your case, the Port Authority is helping, which is amazing. How are you able to do this?
Maybe by default, I don't know. In fact, I don't CC the president these days, because the president said he wanted to invite the prime minister to the opening of this. But we don't have a prime minister, so, and I don't think we will have by the time we finish this project. But it's basically the people who are taking in charge. So in terms of the public art catalyst, even during, Lebanon has gone through a huge revolution, and there were lots of huge monuments, if you want, presented there, just symbolizing the people's revolutionary mind in order to bring a different system to the country. Now, it's true that the blasts have changed all of this, and all powers of people have gone into, I wouldn't say reconstruction, and just creating a survival mode for hundreds and hundreds of families, closing their windows, I mean, during especially this whole period, it has been very dramatic. It has been very distressing to find all these people without their own homes, like a whole wall would have left. How to close a window where there is no wall to close? So yeah, public art would bring something new. People are attempting to do it probably on a small scale through community activities, if they can. The sort of public art that I'm doing is on a much bigger scale, but it involves so many professionals in different field, different community. And I think this project, if it had 1% commercial value to it, it will not happen, especially in such a situation. The only value of this project is that it comes from the power of everybody collaborating on it. Of course, I'm leading the initiative because it's my idea to create this element. I'm sometimes concerned how it's going to look at the end. Is it going to be another Frankenstein in the city? But still, this is better than having nothing, just to commemorate all what we would like to do, to be able to do a small gesture for the victims. You know, this is kind of the first to answer about the public art issue. I'm looking forward that more of those initiatives happen. There are no funds for them. That's the problem. The funding goes first to the needy, which I understand and which is very important. First, you have to make sure that people can live decently. Is a difficult word to use because we're under that now until this happens. And second is to start this, but you know, there's always the need for the soul to enjoy, to create, to move forward. And I think that's what we're doing. We're trying to heal ourselves through public art, through measures of this sort. And in terms of cultural activities, I mean, the commercial galleries have started again to move forward. And the encouragement to create cultural activities is not yet fully in, but I feel that there is the tendency for getting beside the social implications, the cultural implications. So there is a socio-cultural presence in the Lebanese scene. It's not yet clear, but I mean, so many creative people are trying to do something, but it's a measure where artists, doctors, judges, everybody has been affected, not only by the blast, but by the financial consequences of the blast. I mean, even professors like Professor Saliba, Robert, must have been affected somewhere, I'm sure. And many other teachers at universities in Lebanon have also been affected like those others. Of course, we are affected. And I have thought in my mind, because I do sell lots of works of art, I do big exhibitions, but I thought this year I'm going to consecrate it to community works, like the one I did for the port of Beirut. I'm doing one now for the mountains here, where you have, you know, those mountains that have been cut completely in order to create projects, kind of like there is one which is about creating condominiums in the mountain, but they have cut the mountain really, and the rock has shown, and there's nothing, they could not continue the project. So we have a mountain which is cut into pieces. So I went recently and spoke with the owner of the mountain, the owner of the project that should have incorporated 25 buildings. And I said, look, you have this mountain, beautiful rocks, but completely damaging the shape of the mountain. Why don't we do like cave painting, which is rock painting? And we're going to see the flora and the fauna of this area. Get the kids and children to do the sketches about what they think of this area, including my sketches, and just put them on the mountain. And because now this mountain is an area between Harissa and Saheli, which is an empty area, and because of confinement, so many people are now walking on this roads that are usually vehicular roads, you know, so many people. So it's for them to look at this mountain. It's for them to create an identity for the mountains through kind of images on the rocks, which is a huge images. Each rock is 10 meters because the buildings are 3 to 4 floors. And the client is now kind of interested. He phoned last time, he said, when do you want to begin this project? Because I said, look, there's no problem. The day you want to construct our project, you can take it out. But I know he's not going to do so because the finances have changed everything. So we're trying to save the context of the mountain by involving the villages that are around it to create this project. That's why I'm thinking that in such times, community projects are the most important thing, because as you said, it's important to create cultural activities that are related to communities. And yeah, I have kind of dedicated this year to this. When I am in Lebanon, I'll be doing this. And also I would like to generate, of course, income to be able to do the projects I'm doing benevolently, besides all the professionals supporting this initiative. So I'm trying to open an office in Rotterdam and continue from here to create projects worldwide.
Nadim, I think that Jianlu gave you a great idea. What she, please, Jianlu, correct me if I'm wrong. What she told you is that based on your desert project, can't you think about creating these catalytic insertions in the city as it is now, you know, as during this post-blast period? I think Jianlu's idea is great. What do you think?
In fact, I'm applying it to the mountain rather than to the...
No, I think you should apply it
to the mountain. So the idea
is right, you know,
is transferring
apply it to the city. So
yeah, I mean, we should apply it to the city, but no, of course, but yeah, the idea is to have different now things, as long as they create this feeling of bringing communities together. That's the most important thing for me at the moment, you know.
Yeah. So
Nadim,
Nadim, many thanks. So
excuse me, I intervene. I have a small question, but I was waiting for everyone to finish their questions.
Yeah, we have to finish in 2 to 3 minutes. Okay.
I'll wrap it really quickly. Thank you, Nadim. I've always been a fan of your work and teaching a design studio at LEU regarding the folies and the Ridas text on Chumi's folies. So we go into a lot of notions of pavilions. How does it?
Your line is cutting. Sorry, hello.
Can you hear me clearly now?
No, I can hear you.
Layla, we can hear you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was saying that I'm teaching now a course at LEU regarding folies. So the students basically need to intervene on the city doing a folly. Yeah. And we've been into lots of theory, and I wonder why I don't see any politics in your pavilions or installations, because when I tackle theory in my course, the students cannot ever discuss issues of the city without discussing politics. And I have a question when you mention about the president and the prime minister who literally did the bombing, according to my opinion. And as you said, all of us were affected. I was literally 50 centimeters away from a man who was crushed in front of me. And the trauma now keeps asking me, why was it him, not me, who died? So
yeah, I mean, that's the same for us.
So whenever I hear the word of president, prime minister, anyone affiliated with the state, I get that traumatic cycle erupting again. Don't you think these people should be really cut off from that project of yours at the port?
Of course, I mean, I don't even think of them. It's not that do I think they should or should not, I just don't think of them. You know, it's different. If you want to do projects and get them through in such conditions, you cannot, I mean, the apolitical opinion is the most important, because that's not what we're seeking. I mean, the idea is that we're talking about victims. Do they have their own affiliation? Maybe they had, but at the end, they are corpses. They are people who died due to what the others have done. And of course, I'm somebody who is saying that we should have a new suit in Lebanon and get the rest away. But I don't get into these discussions because they could be like those shout and silence. They could be just shouting. I can argue until tomorrow. You can answer with other argument until after tomorrow, and we reach nowhere. But when there is a project to submit, when there is an idea to develop, these do not need necessarily politicians. They need creativity, they need endeavor, they need community brought together, they need all those other issues in order for them to happen. Politicians can stop them, yes. So that's why the project, I never say I finished it before it is standing, because it's true. If, by the way, politicians get into encountering this, they could or adopt it, which I don't want, that this party adopts it against the other, or they could stop it because of political issues, if you want. So we're talking and we're still working on a level where nobody knows what we're doing until it happens. Even now, the social media has no idea of this project, and we should not have any idea of this project. And I'm telling all of you, it's a confidential project until we start it on social media, which is just at the end, at the time where it could be. I'm sure it's finishing and I'm sure it's standing. So you're right. I think politics, or I personally think politics has nothing to do with it and should have nothing to do with it. Although it's all about politics. Robert wrote once about this in an article, that the apolitical is a political act. And it's the political act that's very difficult to get through things, you know? Like I feel that for us to construct this, the gesture, we've created our own government, you know? And I also know that if this project has to be sponsored financially by anybody, it will not happen. So that's why I go to people, I say, it's not the issue of you have to put or you have to pay for sponsorship. It's the issue of you doing your part. And this other person, it's the issue of you doing your part. The developer has to pay us money, although maybe I have this money to pay. But it's a collaborative thing that we should, all of us, participate into. I mean, it's a due to all of us to get this country moving. And we're not talking about the country, we're talking now about a simple, small sculpture of 8 floors. That what I'm doing, I always put myself like you, and you could have been, if this guy died 50 centimeters from you, I could have been that person. So we all have the same thinking process. So the gesture, when it happens, it's nothing compared to the scale of what happened. It's just a small gesture. That's why it's called a gesture, because however big it is, let's say it's 2 kilometers high, it's still nothing. People died, people were injured, I mean, you have been injured in your mind, I have been injured, people in front of me have been, I'm sure Robert has been. So we all are in the same trauma, what we call trauma, and we're trying each one to heal it in a way or in another. I hope this project happens. It will happen if politicians do not interfere in it. Let me put it this way.
Thank you very much for this impressive work and presentation. It's truly inspiring. I think now we should head to, maybe we could have a 5 minutes break if nobody still has any questions.
Hey, okay, Riba, thank you. I'm back. You know,
yes,
I had an electricity cut, so now I'm back. Okay, so
yours is at 3. You reminded me, so I know what time it is.
Yeah. So Nadim, many thanks. Okay, I think we have to stop now. So again and again, thank you so much for this presentation. And then I hope that we could, you know, you'll be present in our final juries to give your, you know, different perspective on our work. So thanks, Nadim, again.
Thanks.
Again and again. Okay.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks a lot.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Okay, next, please, if we can take 5 minutes, a 5 minutes, break. The next intervention will be by Ali Ghaddar, and I will introduce Ali after the break. So we will be back at 3:15. Okay, so just 5 minutes break. Thank you so much, Nadim, again. And if you have time, you can stay probably, for the next talk, in case you have time.
Oh,
Okay.
thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
See my time. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.